start with this one point because I think that is something people would certainly be interested in. We heard, I think, very comprehensive presentations from IRENA and from the IEA. If I may ask both of you, where do you see the differences between the work that both of you are doing, and where do you see, would you see there's mainly kind of same direction? If I may start with Paolo.
There are differences, but to be honest, I would highlight the similarities, which is it's a huge change. To be honest, I mean, obviously, if you go quickly through it, the biggest differences are in energy efficiency. We are a little bit more ambitious than IRENA. We use nuclear. There are a few things, but for me, the big message does not change. This is a huge paradigm shift, which needs a huge acceleration of all forms of renewables, a big change in infrastructure that enables these renewables, a much stronger focus on heat transport as opposed just to electricity. I would stress by far these similar messages, which should sound as a big alert and a big alarm also to governments to take immediate action to accelerate these trends by a factor 10 or 100, as Rana mentioned herself. I frankly speaking, I would stress the similarities much more than the differences. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Ricardo.
I have to agree with you, Paolo. So it's amazing how similar the scenarios are indeed. So basically the message is very similar in that sense of the transformation and the effort that's needed. We reach similar numbers in terms of full energy, total primary energy, final energy. So we more or less understand that we need by 2050 to be at nearly the same energy mix there. But indeed, it's not just about power, it's about energy as a whole. So the end use sectors, it's very important. As you pointed as well, we understand nuclear has a limited role in terms of competitiveness. So basically, this is the difference. We may have more renewables in the power in the end, but not that much. But in general, the end use sector, I understand, is not that different as well. So our guidance are similar, and this is very good to have both agencies with pushing that in the same direction. So 1.5 again is feasible. Let's push for that. As I said before, indeed, it's very important to act now rather than wait. Right, the technologies are there.
Yeah, I think that is indeed, I would support this, that it's indeed important that in particular policymakers understand that we talk about dimensions, that we need to accelerate this transition. Anyone would like to add to these statements from our panelists?
I would like to jump in from one side. I think
Please, Rana.
yeah, there is indeed, I think that's a very strong message to have IEA and IRENA aligning basically on the vision. I think that's super important. It's also important because the messenger is different and the players who will listen to the messages are different. And I think that is something which is very powerful and which we need to use much more strategically, I think, as renewable energy community to build up alliances that are a bit atypical with the mining sector, etc., having strong messages on renewable energy as a sustainable solution. I would, however, like to underline some differences because I think in some countries they can be quite critical. And we've just received, I think, through the IRENA Coalition for Action, some input on Japan, for instance. I think when it comes down to net zero, there is a difference between net zero and 100% renewable energy. And the difference comes in when we are talking about CCS, the difference comes in when we are speaking about nuclear. And the difference probably also comes in when we speak about hydrogen that is not renewable-based hydrogen. And this is not a particular message to IEA, not at all, but I just think is depending on the messengers, this is where we will need to have a much more differentiated discussion, especially when we are looking at countries where the transition is more challenging, where it's not only cheap renewable electricity that will make it happen, where we have a space-constrained environment, etc. So I think it's that's really something where we also see that at one point the global discussion is not enough anymore. We need to bridge the global discussion to what is happening locally, to the players that are there, resources there, flexibility options, whether it is the interconnection, whether it is a sector coupling or whatsoever, and also governance when it comes to cities and citizens' involvement.
Yeah, Rana, I mean, we're on the same page here, without doubt, and there is a question which is related to that, and you know that we've been pushing always for these kind of decentralized approaches. There is a question before we go to Christian. Let's just briefly refer to that here. Sandra Prüve is asking about that, how to make funds available for such storytelling, for mobilizing citizens, etc. I mean, I think we are not the right ones here to really give or tell you exactly where you can get that money. But Rana, maybe you would like to add to that from that perspective. It just fits to what you just said. And I know that Trend 21 is also working on that and trying to kind of be the multiplier that mobilizes.
I mean, I think, again, from our side, we clearly see like budget is really a problem here, especially when we're looking at the renewable sector. Historically, there is not the same budget on communication, campaigning, etc., as we'll see in more conventional energy player sectors. So this is something to also take into account when we are speaking about a rather decentralized voice or narrative that are rather scattered from the renewable side, because it's different renewable energy technologies, because it's in the context of climate, in context of energy access, energy security, so more scattered. And I think this is why it is really important that basically all players on the panel today are underlining how important it is to work together. I think this is really about this rather unification or an amplification of some narrative on renewable energy. Now the reality is, and I think we always say like, we're asking many decision makers to change their behavior. And I think that also requires behavior change on our side. It means that we bring in other disciplines to complement our expert discussions. Because we need to make basically our expert discussions relevant to decision makers who don't understand what we are speaking about. Let's be really honest. And this is not meant in a negative way. I'm myself an engineer. When I'm participating on modeling of infrastructure, etc., there is a moment where I cannot follow. When I listen to some finance experts, I think this is really, it's highly technical. So I think there is really a need that we enable ourselves to bridge basically between these ecosystems by addressing jargon. So investment in translators, so to say. And the other part is, and I think this is where long marketing studies and behavior change, etc., show it. It is not enough to have the facts. If the facts and science were enough, we would not be where we are. We need to, and this sounds like a very, I don't know, slimy, I'd say, but we need to touch people's heart. And this means that they engage in the vision. And we also need to touch their wallets, because the community energy and citizens involvement works well if you also have a part of the auctions dedicated to citizens and community energy. And when a farmer looks at a wind turbine and knows that while it is running, he or she might not particularly like the aesthetics of it, but ultimately there is an economic benefit for them too. So I think this is basically where governance and also the policy frameworks we need to look at are multi-level, because and they are multi-level, and they need to account much more for the fact that without the narratives and the right messages, we will not be able to make this a societal change.
Thank you so much, Rana. And I think I totally agree with what you said. And now I saw Christian also raising his hand. Christian, you wanted to add something, but maybe that differs to what was said before.
It's very close to what Rana said, but it's it takes a different perspective. And that is, I'm getting the feeling at the moment that our society starts to block itself in the transformation. And part of that blocking is, of course, coming from the existing economic interests in fossil energy. I mean, they will struggle and fight not to lose their business. That's obvious, and it's very, very strongly feelable also in the policy arena. It's very difficult to get through with our messages because of this, because they're very well established political connections. But there is another issue that I find really worrisome, and that is the position of environmental organizations that find all kinds of reasons to be against renewable energy because they don't like the look, because they are afraid birds will get kicked over by windmills, or because they believe that we're going to burn all the forests for energy. Neither of this is going to be is going to happen. We're all committed to running this in a sustainable way to make sure that we minimize the impact. But it's very easy to find. I mean, in German we say to find a hair in the soup, and that is something I find really worrisome. That you can find and you can complain about the environmental impacts of every renewable energy technology, and there are these impacts. But if you don't kind of develop a positive approach and look how to improve things rather than how to prohibit and keep from happening renewable energy, we will have a hard time.
Yes. Thank you very much. I do not see any other questions here, so I would also, looking at the time, now come to the conclusion of this webinar, and I'd say a great thank you to all our speakers, in particular to Rana from REN21, Paolo Franke from the IEA, and also to Riccardo Gorini from IRENA. It was great to have you all. I think that was a special opportunity also to listen to all of you in this one session. Thanks a lot for taking the time, for being available also for this small discussion that we had here. Let me mention that the webinar is not, of course, not only broadcasted live, but it will be made available, so you can watch it again if you want on YouTube, on the WWEA YouTube channel. And of course, we will share the link with you after this webinar. Now, as a very brief for the participants, I would like to just briefly launch a poll here. Those of you who want to receive more information from our organizations, please press here, and then we will forward your address to the corresponding organization so that you can receive, for example, newsletters from the organizations, and it will not share it with anyone else. Again, thank you very much to everyone, also to our REN Alliance partners. And Peter, you are still with us. Then you have the final word to say goodbye.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, well, thank you, Stefan. Thank you, everybody, for what has been an excellent session. And I just hope that we can take this further at some future date and revisit a lot of the areas to see how much further we can stretch the ideas and the ways which have been demonstrated during this past couple of hours. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Stefan, for your management of the session. And that concludes this webinar. I think we can take a vote on it, and I suggest the vote would be yes, it's been an excellent one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Goodbye.